used to think love was the one thing in this world strong enough to fight back the dark. I thought if two people truly cared for each other, no shadow could touch them, no matter how deep the night. But I know better now. Because love doesn't save you from the dark. Sometimes it brings you to it. Started in the summer of 2021 in Monterey, California. If you've ever been there, you know what I mean when I say the air feels heavy with salt, like the ocean itself wants to remind you it's close by, breathing against your skin. That summer was hot in a way coastal towns rarely are. The gulls cried louder, the boardwalk smelled thicker of fried food, and the seaweed rotting on the rocks baked under the sun. I was 25, working part-time at a small used bookstore on Lighthouse Avenue. That's where I first met Clara. Clara had this kind of presence that slipped under your guard before you even realized it. She was 22, a student at the local community college, with hair that fell dark and messy to her shoulders and eyes the color of bottle glass left out in the sand. The first time she came in, she bought a copy of Sylvia Plath's collected poems, her fingers brushing mine as I handed her the receipt. "Do you ever feel like words are heavier than they look?" she asked me, just like that, no introduction. I laughed, more awkward than charming. "Depends on the words." That was Clara. Direct, but in a way that made you want to follow wherever she was leading. She came back the next day and the day after, always buying something small. An old paperback, a coffee-stained travel guide, even a torn children's book once. Eventually, she stopped pretending. "I'm not here for the books," she admitted one evening when the fog had rolled in from the water, turning the street lights into floating orbs. She leaned against the counter, smiling like she was daring me to say something. "Good," I told her. "Because I was starting to think you had terrible taste in literature." Her laugh was soft and quick, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something light spark in my chest. By July, we were inseparable. Long walks on the beach at night, cheap tacos eaten in her beat-up Toyota Corolla, hours sprawled in my apartment listening to records. She always wanted the windows open no matter the weather. "I liked the world coming in," she'd say, as if she couldn't stand the thought of being closed off, and I loved her for it. I loved the way her mind moved, how she saw patterns where I saw only noise. She'd stop in the middle of a sidewalk and point out how the cracks lined up like constellations. She'd trace the veins in my wrist and whisper, "You're carrying rivers inside you." It was real. It was love. The first strange thing happened in August. We had driven out to Asilomar Beach late at night. The moon was thin and the tide was high, the kind that crashes harder and pulls farther back than you expect. Clara stood barefoot in the wet sand, staring out at the waves like she was waiting for them to speak. "Do you hear it?" she asked. "Hear what?" "The voices," she said. "They sound like they're calling names." I listened, uneasy, but all I heard was the surf pounding against the rocks. When I told her that, she frowned, not angry but disappointed, like I had failed some unspoken test. Later, when we were lying in the backseat of her car, she whispered my name in the dark again and again until I asked her why. "Because if I don't," she said, her voice trembling just slightly, "something else will." I told myself it was a joke or maybe too much cheap wine, but that was when things began to shift. Clara started waking up in the middle of the night, staring at the corner of my room. Sometimes she would sit up so quickly I'd jolt awake too, my heart hammering. "What is it?" I'd ask, but she would just shake her head, eyes wide, whispering, "Don't look." I tried to convince her to see someone, maybe a doctor, maybe a therapist, but she refused. Instead, she asked me to trust her. And I did. Because love makes you trust even when you shouldn't. One evening in late September, she showed up at my apartment drenched from the fog, her clothes clinging to her skin. She looked wild, terrified, her hair matted to her face. "They followed me," she whispered. I pulled her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, tried to calm her down. "Who followed you?" But she wouldn't answer, just pressed herself against me, trembling. I remember the smell of salt water thick on her, stronger than it should have been. After that, she started drawing. Not just doodles, but frantic sketches that filled pages and pages of my old notebooks. Figures in the mist, faces half-formed, bodies stretched and wrong. And always, somewhere in the mess, the two of us holding hands or lying together, surrounded by those shapes. "Why do you keep drawing these?" I asked her one night. Her eyes locked on mine, and for once she didn't look afraid. She looked resigned. "Because they want us together. Forever. That's the only way it stops." I didn't know what she meant, and she never explained. By October, Clara wasn't herself anymore. She stopped eating much, stopped sleeping at all. Some nights, I'd find her standing barefoot outside, staring at the ocean like she was waiting for someone to arrive. That I begged her to let me help. I told her we could leave Monterey, go somewhere inland, away from the water. But she only shook her head. They don't care where we go, she said. They're inside us now. The last night I saw Clara, it was raining. Real rain, not fog, rare for Monterey in autumn. She came to my apartment soaked again, eyes burning with something between love and madness. She kissed me harder than she ever had before, her hands gripping mine like she was trying to anchor herself. I love you, she whispered, her forehead pressed to mine. And I'm sorry. Before I could ask why, she was gone. I didn't hear her leave. The door never opened. She was simply gone. The police called it a disappearance. No signs of struggle, no leads. Her car was found near the beach, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. That it's been 4 years and I still dream of her. I wake to the sound of waves crashing, though I live miles inland now. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear her voice whispering my name over and over, just like she used to, as if trying to keep something else from saying it first. And sometimes, when I can't fight the urge anymore, I drive back to Monterey. I walk the shoreline at Asilomar, listening to the tide, and I swear, God help me, I can hear it. My name, carried in the water, calling me closer. Calling me back to her. You never realize how fragile love can be until it's shadowed by something that isn't quite human. I wish I could unsee what happened, but the memory refuses to leave. I can still hear her voice, even when I know she isn't there. It was early October in Santa Cruz, California. The fog rolled off the Pacific Ocean like a soft, gray blanket, curling through the streets of our small neighborhood as if it belonged there. The kind of morning that smells of salt and damp earth, where the autumn chill clings to your skin in a way that's comforting and intimate at the same time. I was meeting Eliza for coffee at that little corner cafe by the wharf, our favorite place because the chairs were always a little too small and the barista remembered our orders without asking. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the fogged-up window, her hair catching the pale light in strands of copper. She looked up, smiled, and it was like seeing the sun after weeks of rain. Morning, she said, voice soft but warm, the kind that made the rest of the world seem unimportant. Morning, I replied, feeling my chest tighten. We had been together almost a year and it felt effortless. Everything about her, her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she smelled like cinnamon and sea air, made the world brighter. We talked about everything and nothing. Her job at the bookstore, my attempts at writing short stories, our plans for a weekend hike in Big Sur. The cafe hummed with quiet conversation, the clink of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, a normal, peaceful rhythm. After coffee, we walked along the wharf. The fog had thickened, swallowing the boats like ghosts, leaving only the creaking wood beneath our feet. She held my hand, fingers intertwined with mine, and I felt that strange, perfect stillness that comes only when you're with someone you love. I've been thinking, she said, her voice hesitant, maybe we should get a place together. Somewhere small, cozy, nothing fancy. I squeezed her hand, smiling. I think that's the best idea you've ever had. The next few weeks were blissful. We found a small Victorian-style house on the outskirts of town, perched on a hill that overlooked the ocean. It was perfect. Creaking floors, narrow staircases, a fireplace that smelled faintly of old wood, and windows that caught the morning light just right. We spent hours painting, rearranging furniture, laughing at our clumsy attempts at interior design. At night, we would sit on the porch wrapped in blankets, listening to the waves crash against the cliffs below, our conversations drifting from dreams to secrets we had never told anyone. And then the strange things began. It was subtle at first. A shadow flickering at the corner of my vision when I turned away. The feeling that someone, or something, was watching us, always from just beyond the fog. Eliza mentioned it once. Do you ever feel like someone's out there? Watching? She asked, her voice light, trying to dismiss the unease. That I laughed nervously. It's probably just the fog playing tricks. But it wasn't. Not entirely. Doors would creak open when we were alone. A faint tapping would echo through the walls at night, slow and deliberate, like fingernails tracing the wood. At first, we chalked it up to the old house settling, but then it started whispering. Not voices in a conventional sense, but fragments, half-heard syllables that made the air feel thick and oppressive. I would wake to the smell of smoke in the kitchen, though no fire had ever been lit. And Eliza, she began to change. Small things at first, glances toward corners of the room where nothing stood, sudden shivers for no reason, murmurs she would pretend weren't there. That I tried to comfort her, hold her close, tell her it was nothing, but the unease grew between us. One night, I woke to the sound of her whispering my name in the darkness. I reached for her, only to find the bed empty. Heart hammering, I searched the house and finally found her standing on the porch, staring out over the cliffs, her hair whipping in the wind, eyes wide and unblinking. "Eliza?" I said, voice cracking. She didn't answer. She didn't even turn to me. The air around her shimmered like heat haze, and the fog seemed to twist closer, curling around her like fingers. When she finally spoke, her voice wasn't quite hers. "He's here," she said softly, as if it had always been true that I never knew who she meant. I never saw anyone. But after that night she changed completely. She became distant, almost fragile, like a candle fighting against a storm. I loved her more than ever, but it was a love tinged with fear. Every smile, every touch, felt desperate, like she was trying to cling to a life that was slipping away. One evening, I found her standing at the top of the staircase, staring down into the darkness of the living room. I followed her gaze and saw nothing. When I touched her shoulder, she turned to me, and her eyes, those eyes I had loved so deeply, were blackened at the edges, like a shadow had crept inside them. "I have to go," she whispered. "Where? What are you talking about?" I asked, panic rising. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't explain. Just, don't look for me." And she was gone. I searched for weeks. Called her friends, her family, the police. Nothing. The house felt hollow without her, yet alive in a way that terrified me. The whispers continued, louder now, more urgent. The fog outside seemed to coil around the house like it had claimed it as its own. Some nights, I swear I saw her reflection in the windows, smiling at me, though I was alone. I left Santa Cruz eventually, moving to a small apartment in San Jose. But the memory never left. Every foggy morning, every creak in the floorboards, every distant sound of someone whispering my name drags me back there. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see her on the porch, staring into the cliffs, waiting. Not for me, I know that now. For whatever it was that took her. I loved her. I still do. But love, I learned, is fragile. And when it's shadowed by something beyond our understanding, it can become a curse. That I keep telling myself she's out there somewhere. But some nights, I wonder if she's ever coming back. And I don't know if I want her to. Because when love turns to fear, sometimes it doesn't end. Just waits. If I ever disappear, it won't be because I wanted to leave. I want that to be clear from the start. I loved her more than I've ever loved anything in my life, and I think she loved me too. But love doesn't always save you. Sometimes it's what damns you. I met Caroline in San Luis Obispo, California, back in 2017. It was a Sunday morning, mild weather the way the Central Coast always is, low fog burning off by late morning, leaving the air cool but not cold, a faint smell of salt drifting inland from the ocean. I was at Kreuzberg Coffee on Higuera Street, grading papers. At the time I was teaching part-time at Cal Poly. She was in line ahead of me, wearing a loose gray sweater and holding a copy of Wuthering Heights under her arm. When she ordered, she asked the barista if they still carried the lavender lattes, and when the barista said no, she turned and made a mock-dramatic sigh that caught my attention. "You're disappointed too, right?" she asked me directly. I wasn't expecting it. Most people in coffee shops keep to themselves, but she smiled with this openness that felt disarming. I told her I'd never tried lavender anything, but I'd take her word for it. That's how it started. We sat together that day, talking long after the foam in our cups collapsed into cold milk, and I remember thinking how easy it was. No awkward silences, no forced small talk. Just easy. From there we were inseparable. We walked through Mission Plaza on warm nights, bought used vinyls at Boo Boo Records, took Sunday drives up Highway 1 just to sit on the cliffs and listen to the waves smash against the rocks below. She had this way of holding my hand that made me feel steady, like I'd been drifting without realizing it, and she was the anchor I didn't know I needed. Why fall? We were living together in a small one-bedroom on Del Mar Street. The place was old, with squeaky floorboards and thin walls that let in the hum of traffic from Foothill Boulevard. It didn't matter. The nights were ours. She'd read to me in bed, sometimes old Gothic novels, sometimes poetry. I still remember her voice reciting, "Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same." She smiled at me when she read it, her eyes catching the glow of the bedside lamp. It didn't feel cheesy. It felt true. The first strange thing happened in November. We were cooking together. She was chopping onions and I was standing behind her, half distracted by the song playing on her Spotify. She dropped the knife suddenly, clutched her wrist and winced. I asked what was wrong, but she just shook her head. Later, when I pressed her about it, she admitted she'd felt something cold grip her hand. She said it as if she wasn't sure herself, like maybe it was just her imagination. We laughed it off. But after that, small things started piling up. Some nights I'd wake and find her sitting upright in bed, staring at the corner where the closet was, her eyes wide but unblinking. I'd ask what she was looking at and she'd say, "Nothing. Go back to sleep." Other times, I'd come home from class to find the lights off and her sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, silent, her coffee mug cold in front of her. When I asked, she always said she just lost track of time. One night in December, when the rain came hard and the air smelled like wet asphalt, I woke to find her whispering into the dark. At first, I thought she was talking in her sleep, but when I shifted, I realized her lips were moving with intention, like she was answering someone I couldn't hear. I touched her shoulder and she snapped her head toward me with such force it made my chest seize. Her expression softened instantly and she laughed nervously. "Bad dream," she said, lying back down. But her hands trembled against mine until morning. I tried to tell myself it was stress. Caroline was finishing her graduate thesis and she wasn't sleeping much. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that apartment had its hooks in her. The air grew heavier, oppressive, as if the rooms themselves were watching us. Sometimes I'd catch the faintest smell, like earth after rain, but sour, wrong, coming from the closet. She'd avoid that corner altogether, leaving her clothes in piles around the room instead of opening the door. Our love didn't fade, not exactly. But it grew strained, like a violin string pulled too tight. We still kissed, still said we loved each other, but beneath it was something fraying. She'd apologize constantly, "I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me," and I'd hold her, whispering that she didn't need to be sorry. Yet even when I kissed her, I felt like she was slipping somewhere I couldn't follow. The night it broke was a Tuesday in late January. The sky had been clear all day, the air cool and dry. We had dinner together, pasta with pesto, and she seemed lighter than she had in weeks. She laughed at my dumb jokes again, reached across the table to hold my hand. For the first time in months, I thought maybe it was passing, maybe we were okay. But when we went to bed, I woke to the sound of her whispering again. This time I forced myself to stay still, to listen. Her voice was soft but urgent, answering questions I couldn't hear. I caught fragments. "Yes. I love him. I'll try." Then silence. I sat up and she wasn't in bed. My chest went cold. I found her standing in front of the closet, the door open wide. The smell of earth was so strong it made me gag. She turned toward me slowly and her eyes weren't hers anymore. They were glassy, wet, like she'd been crying for hours. "I told him," she said flatly. "I told him I love you. But he's angry. He doesn't want me here anymore." I stammered something, I don't even know what, but she stepped back into the dark of the closet before I could reach her. The door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. I ripped it open, screaming her name, but the closet was empty. Just coats, shoes, and that suffocating smell of wet soil. She never came back. The police said she must have left me, that people do strange things under stress. They searched the area, questioned friends, combed through our apartment. Nothing. Her phone, her wallet, even her shoes were still there. I've moved since then, but I dream of her constantly. Sometimes in the dreams, she's sitting across from me in Kreuzberg coffee again, smiling with that same disarming openness. Other times she's standing in the closet, whispering into the dark. I always wake to that smell of damp earth lingering in the air, even though I don't live on Delmar Street anymore. I know what people will say. Grief makes you imagine things. Love makes you blind. But I know she didn't just leave. Something in that apartment wanted her. Took her. And the cruelest part is, I still love her with everything in me. Even if it means she's somewhere I can't go, talking to someone I can't hear. If you ever find yourself in San Luis Obispo, don't go near Delmar Street. And if you do, don't open any doors that smell of earth after rain. Because love doesn't always save you. Sometimes it buries you alive. I never believed in ghosts. I never believed in curses. But falling in love in a quiet California town changed all of that. And now, when I remember her smile, I can't tell if I'm smiling or screaming that it was early October in Carmel by the sea, and the morning fog rolled lazily over the coastline, softening the edges of the pastel cottages that lined the streets. I was sipping black coffee on the porch of my small rental house near Ocean Avenue, the scent of salt and damp pine lingering in the air, when I saw her for the first time. She was crouched on the beach, sketchbook open, hair damp and clinging to her cheeks, completely absorbed in whatever she was drawing. Her name was Lila, and the way she tilted her head, lost in her own little world, made my heart ache in a way I hadn't known was possible. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual as I set my mug down. She looked up, startled, but her eyes, blue, stormy, impossible, softened immediately. "Oh, hi," she said, brushing wet hair behind her ear. "I didn't hear you come up." I smiled, my usual awkwardness vanishing. I wasn't exactly sneaking. I don't know, thought you might like some company." She laughed lightly, a sound like wind chimes tangled in the fog. "I do actually. I was just trying to capture the way the tide hits the rocks. It's harder than it looks." That was the start of everything. Days turned into walks along the cliffs, sharing sandwiches and laughter as the fog lifted in the afternoons. Nights were long and soft, filled with the hum of waves and whispered confessions under street lamps that glowed like lanterns in the mist. We fell into each other easily, the kind of love that feels inevitable, like it had been waiting for us in every small, quiet corner of the world. One evening, we were sitting in my living room, the windows open to let in the cold sea air. Lila was curled up against me, sketchbook in hand, drawing the shadows the lamp cast across the walls. I traced my fingers along her hair. "You know," I said softly, "I feel like I could do this forever, just sit here with you and nothing else matters." Her lips curved into a smile, warm and tender. "I feel the same way. Like we're the only two people who exist right now." But that evening, as the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing, I noticed something. A faint tapping like fingernails against glass, but slow, deliberate. I glanced outside, but the street was empty, the mist swirling over the pavement. I told myself it was the wind. Lila didn't hear it, and I didn't mention it. The small oddities began to accumulate. Footsteps in the attic above the kitchen when no one was there. A shadow at the end of the hallway that disappeared when we turned toward it. The occasional sketch in Lila's book that I didn't remember her drawing. A face with hollow eyes, grinning in a way that made the page feel cold. She laughed it off each time. "Must have been me sleepwalking," she said. But there was a tension in her eyes, and I felt it. 2.1 rainy afternoon, we decided to take a drive along Highway 1. The ocean was gray, the cliffs jagged, the rain slicking the roads. Lila reached for my hand, squeezing it tight, and I felt the warmth of her palm fight against the chill of the fog. We laughed when our car skidded slightly, adrenaline mixing with affection in a heady, reckless way. But then, when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw a figure standing on the edge of the cliff, watching us. The rain blurred it, but it was unmistakably there, tall, silent. I blinked, and it was gone. I wanted to tell her, but the words caught in my throat. Each time I tried, the air seemed heavier, pressing down on my chest like a warning. Lila noticed my distraction. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her hand on mine was grounding, but there was fear in her voice too. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired, I guess." But we were both lying. The unease became a part of us, like a shadow stretching behind our love. At night, I would wake to hear whispering, soft, indecipherable, coming from the corners of the room. Sometimes I would find Lila staring at the ceiling, eyes wide and unblinking, murmuring words I couldn't hear. The tipping point came on Halloween night. The town was alive with carved pumpkins and flickering lights, the streets crowded with laughter and music. We had returned to my house early, hoping to escape the noise. Lila was in the kitchen, humming as she poured wine, and I sat on the couch, tracing my fingers across the grain of the wood. "Do you ever feel like we're being watched?" I asked, trying not to sound crazy. She froze, glass in hand. "Sometimes, yeah," she whispered. Her eyes darted to the shadows in the corners, where the flickering candlelight made the walls tremble. And then it happened. The air went cold, so cold that our breath was visible, and the lamp flickered violently before plunging us into darkness. I heard the scraping again, the slow, deliberate movement of something impossible. Something that did not belong. "Lila?" I said, my voice tight. She didn't answer. I stood, fumbling for the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the living room in a harsh, white glare. And there she was, her sketchbook lying open on the floor. The face on the page was not drawn in her style. It was me. My face. Twisted in terror, eyes wide and screaming, mouth open. I dropped to my knees, my hands shaking. Lila, did you? She appeared behind me, voice trembling. I didn't. I swear I didn't draw that. Her fingers brushed mine, but her touch felt distant, unreal, as if the warmth of our love had been siphoned away by the darkness that had crept into our home. The following days blurred together. Lila became withdrawn, silent, her sketches now filled with impossible shapes and hollow-eyed figures. I started seeing glimpses of shadows that weren't mine, and hearing faint laughter in the attic at night. We stayed together because we were afraid of leaving, afraid of being alone, but the house seemed to feed on our fear, twisting our love into something suffocating. One night, I woke to find her gone from the bedroom. The fog pressed against the windows, and the faint smell of sea salt was overpowered by a scent I didn't recognize, something metallic, sour. I followed the faint light of her candle to the attic. The door was ajar, and inside she stood facing the wall, sketchbook in hand. Her hair was wet, her eyes fixed on a drawing that hadn't been there before. A pair of hands reaching from the darkness, clawing toward the viewer. I whispered her name. She turned, face pale, eyes hollow. It wants me, she said. I can feel it. I can't stop it. I lunged forward, grabbing her, holding her tight, but she shivered violently as if trying to break free from something unseen. We need to leave, I pleaded. We can run. But she smiled, a sad, terrible smile. It's already here. We brought it with us, with our love. It's feeding, and it will never let go. I don't remember what happened next. I woke hours later on the beach, the tide washing over me, alone. Lila was gone. Only her sketchbook remained, pages fluttering in the wind, filled with drawings that made my stomach churn. The two of us, together, smiling, and then shadows closing in from all sides, swallowing the light. I still see her sometimes at the edge of the fog on quiet streets in my dreams. She's smiling, but there's something wrong with that smile, something that chills me to the bone. I don't know if she's alive, or if she's part of whatever followed us from that foggy house in Carmel. I don't know if I will ever see her again. But I do know that love can be beautiful and terrifying, and sometimes, the thing you cherish most can become your worst nightmare. I never thought love could be dangerous, at least not in the way I experienced it. There's a certain charm to fall evenings in Santa Barbara, a warmth that makes you believe the world is safe. But sometimes, the people you love most bring the darkness in with them. It was late September in Santa Barbara, and the air carried a softness that hinted at the lingering heat of summer. The sun had just begun to dip behind the distant Channel Islands, painting the sky in muted shades of pink and burnt orange. I remember standing on the balcony of my small apartment overlooking State Street, the salty scent of the ocean mingling with the faint aroma of roasted coffee from the cafe below. The streets hummed with evening traffic, and distant laughter from a group of students echoed from the university quad. That night I was waiting for Lena. Lena and I had met 3 months earlier at a bookstore near the pier. She was arguing softly with the clerk over a rare edition of East of Eden, her dark curls falling into her eyes as she gestured animatedly. I remember laughing, offering to help, and being drawn instantly to her warmth, her subtle humor. Our connection had been effortless, the kind that makes you feel like every moment apart is wasted. When she arrived that evening, the warm California breeze carried her perfume, something floral with a hint of vanilla. She smiled, eyes glinting in the twilight. "Sorry I'm late," she said, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Traffic was a nightmare." "It's fine," I said, taking her hand. "I like watching the sunset with you anyway." We didn't speak much after that, just leaned against the balcony railing, letting the quiet lull between us. It felt natural, perfect even. Later we walked down to the waterfront, laughing about inconsequential things, sharing ice cream cones, and stealing glances that said more than words ever could. That night, everything felt safe, bright, alive. But small, strange things started to creep in after a few weeks. At first, they were subtle, a shadow moving across the corner of the room when she wasn't there, the faint sound of whispering outside my bedroom window, always fading when I turned to look. Lena dismissed it with a laugh. "You're imagining things. Don't let it ruin our night." I wanted to believe her, and for a while, I did that. We began spending almost every evening together, our apartment becoming a shared haven. I remember one night in October, the fog rolling in from the ocean so thick that it swallowed the city in a gray blanket. We were cooking dinner, Lena humming a tune while chopping vegetables. The lights flickered briefly and I thought nothing of it. But then I caught her staring at the doorway, eyes wide, her knife frozen mid-chop. Do you see that?" she whispered. That I turned. Nothing there, just the dim kitchen. "See what?" She shook her head, forcing a smile. "Never mind." From that night, the sense of unease began to grow. The shadows seemed longer, darker. The whispers at the window became more persistent, almost like murmured conversations in a language I didn't understand. Yet, every time I tried to confront Lena about it, she would brush it off, claiming it was just my imagination or the city settling point. One evening, a week before Halloween, we were lying in bed, her head resting on my chest. The wind rattled the window frames, carrying a metallic tang, almost like blood, into the room. She sighed contentedly, running her fingers through my hair. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," I replied, pressing a kiss to her temple, and then I heard it. The whisper, clear this time, unmistakable, coming from the corner of the room. It wasn't a voice I knew, not Lena's, not mine. It hissed, low and guttural, almost like it was spelling out a warning. My heart froze. Lena stiffened beside me. "Did you hear that?" I asked, voice trembling. "Yes," she whispered, gripping my arm. It's been here all along. I wanted to run, but I couldn't." She looked terrified, yet something in her eyes, some recognition, kept me rooted. Over the next few days, the incidents escalated. Objects moved on their own, lights turned on and off, and sometimes I'd catch glimpses of a figure in the fog outside the window, standing just beyond the balcony. Lena began acting strangely too, sometimes distant, other times possessive and fearful. It was the night of the first real storm that things fully unraveled. Rain pounded against the windows, wind howling through the streets. We huddled in the living room with candles flickering, trying to stay warm. She was sitting close to me, but her eyes were distant, almost pleading. "I can't control it," she said suddenly. "It follows me. I don't know why it chose us." I reached for her, but she flinched away. The whispering had returned, louder, almost frantic now, echoing in the corners of the apartment. I could feel it pressing against my chest, a cold, suffocating weight. Lena clutched my hand tightly, her nails digging into my skin. "I think it's attached," she murmured. "It wants us. Or maybe just me." I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but the figure in the shadows moved closer, and for the first time I saw its face. Or at least, something like a face, pale and elongated, its eyes hollow pits of darkness. I screamed, grabbing Lena, trying to pull her away, but she held me back. "It's part of me now," she said, tears streaking her face. "And part of you too if we stay together." The storm raged on, lightning illuminating the room in sharp, jagged flashes. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting into shapes I couldn't comprehend. We clung to each other, hearts pounding, whispering promises of love we both knew might not matter. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the city drenched and silent. Lena was gone. I searched everywhere, her apartment, the pier, the cafes we frequented, but she had vanished without a trace. Only her perfume lingered, faint but unmistakable, in the apartment. And the whispers. The whispers never left. That I still go to the balcony some evenings, watching the fog roll in, hoping I'll see her silhouette again, hoping she's just beyond the mist, waiting. I know though that the figure watches too. And I have learned, in the most terrifying way, that love can linger in places where darkness feeds. Sometimes I think I hear her voice calling my name in the corners of the apartment. Sometimes I see her in the fog. And sometimes when I reach out, I swear the shadow reaches back. That I don't know what happened to her, or to us. I only know that something alive, something hungry, exists in the spaces between love and fear. And sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I can feel it, between us, watching, waiting, and I don't think I'll ever be alone again. I knew something was wrong the moment I woke up that Friday morning. The fog rolling off Monterey Bay was thick, almost tangible, curling around the pastel-colored houses like smoke. It was 6:30, the sky still a washed-out gray, the scent of salt water sharp in the air. I remember looking at Emily sleeping beside me, her hair spread across the pillow, and feeling that familiar warmth of love. We'd been together for almost 3 years, and living in Pacific Grove had been a dream. A quiet town with winding streets, tide pools, and the occasional tourist wandering down Lighthouse Avenue. The world outside was calm, the way it should be on a foggy California morning, but a small, inexplicable chill ran down my spine. Emily stirred, half awake, murmuring something incoherent, and I kissed the crown of her head. "Morning," I whispered. "Coffee?" She yawned and smiled, that sleepy, crooked smile that made my heart twist every time. "Yeah. The fog makes me crave something warm." By 7 we were walking down Ocean View Boulevard, hands intertwined. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the ocean's steel blue waves, and seagulls cried overhead. We talked about mundane things, our favorite bakery, a friend's upcoming birthday party, but even in these ordinary moments, there was a rhythm to us, an ease that made every ordinary day feel extraordinary. I had never believed in fate, but Emily made me reconsider that we had a tradition. Every Friday we'd pick a cafe we'd never been to and try something random. That morning, it was a tiny place tucked between an art gallery and a used bookstore. Emily ordered chai latte, I went with black coffee. We sat by the window watching fog blur the edges of the town, and laughed about something silly I'd done at work. It was perfect. But the first sign that something was off came when the barista glanced at Emily, really looked at her, with a kind of hesitation that didn't belong in a friendly cafe. He didn't smile. He just nodded and went back to the espresso machine. Emily didn't notice, but I did, and a strange tightening in my chest began. That night, we returned to our apartment above the old Victorian on Forest Avenue. The apartment was small, but warm, filled with sunlight during the day, and tonight the fog had returned, pressing against the windows like a living thing. We cooked dinner together, shared a bottle of red wine, and for a moment, everything felt safe again. But when Emily went to fetch dessert from the fridge, I caught a glimpse of something in the reflection of the kitchen window, a shadow that didn't belong. It lingered for only a second before vanishing, but it made my stomach turn. "I thought I saw something outside," I said, though I tried to laugh it off. Emily's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Probably just the fog playing tricks." She smiled but didn't press. That's what I loved about her. Patient, trusting, unfazed by my sometimes ridiculous fears. The next week, subtle things began to unsettle us. Doors we were certain we had locked were ajar. The antique mirror in the hallway, which had always reflected our apartment with slightly distorted warmth, now sometimes seemed colder, almost judging. At night, I would wake to the sound of whispering, soft and indistinct, coming from corners where shadows pooled unnaturally. Emily insisted it was just the building settling, but even she admitted, one night, that she felt watched. Our love was genuine, but the fear began to seep in. It was in the way Emily hesitated before opening closets, the way I double-checked the locks every night. And yet, we clung to each other tighter, as though our love could ward off the darkness creeping at the edges of our lives. That it culminated one Sunday evening. We were walking down the quiet stretch of Lover's Point, the fog thick and almost suffocating. The water was black and churning, and the cliffs cut jagged silhouettes against the sky. Emily was laughing at something I said, but then she stopped mid-step, staring at the fog, her eyes wide with a terror I hadn't seen before. "What is it?" I asked, gripping her hand. I don't know. I feel like someone is there," she whispered. I laughed nervously. "The fog again?" She shook her head. "No, someone else. Watching." That night we didn't sleep. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the scraping of the wind against the window, felt amplified. And then it came, the voice. Low, intimate, almost familiar. A whisper calling Emily's name, echoing from somewhere deep inside the apartment. I turned on every light, checked every door and window, but there was no one. And yet, the voice persisted, soft, beckoning, until Emily sobbed into my chest. Over the following days, the love we had shared became inseparable from the fear that gripped us. Emily changed subtly. She began speaking to herself when she thought I wasn't listening. She would stand in the middle of a room, staring at corners where the shadows pooled, as if waiting. Sometimes I would catch her smiling at empty spaces, and it made my blood run cold. Then one night, it reached its peak. I had gone out to fetch something from the store, and when I returned, the apartment was quiet in a way that made the silence almost scream. Emily wasn't in the living room, not in the bedroom, not in the kitchen. Then I saw her in the hallway mirror. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking behind me, eyes wide and unblinking, her lips moving as if whispering to someone only she could see. "Emily?" I called, my voice cracking. She turned to me slowly, her expression unreadable, and for a fleeting second, the warmth and love I had always known was there. But then her eyes shifted, just slightly, unnatural, and I knew she wasn't entirely herself. "I think it's inside me," she said, almost casually, as if confessing a fact about the weather. "I can hear it. It wants us." I tried to reach for her, but she recoiled, and then she laughed, a sound both beautiful and horrifying, before vanishing into the fog-drenched night. I ran after her, calling her name, but the streets were empty, silent except for the distant crash of waves. By the time I reached the cliffs, she was gone. Nothing remained but a faint echo of her voice, calling my name over and over, and the fog, thick and unyielding, swallowing the world that I never saw her again. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in from Monterey Bay, I swear I hear her laughter, soft and distant, mixed with whispers I cannot understand. I keep our apartment, though I can no longer live there. The mirror in the hallway still reflects something odd. Shadows that linger too long, corners that darken even in full light, and sometimes, just sometimes, the faint outline of Emily standing behind me, smiling, watching. That I love her still. And I fear her more than anything. The love that once saved me now feels like a trap, a lure into something I cannot escape. I tell myself she's gone, but the truth is, I don't know if she ever left. And every foggy morning, every creaking floorboard, every whisper in the dark reminds me that love, in its purest form, can become the most terrifying thing imaginable.